Hi, everybody. I have a very special treat for you. Joining me today is Tatjana Anders. Tatjana is the writer, producer, and the lead character in her movie, Your Reality. For those of you who haven't seen the review I did of Your Reality, I'll make sure the link is down below. It's a movie about gaslighting and narcissistic abuse. It's brilliantly done, and she's joining me today to talk with you about the movie. Everybody, welcome Tatjana Anders. Tatjana, thank you so much, and congratulations on your movie. It has reached over 1 million views on YouTube. It's an award-winning film, and we want to talk about the characters in the movie. So if you don't mind, share with us right now the story behind the lead characters who happen to be Alicia and Mark. Why don't you tell us a little bit about these characters? How would you describe them, and where did you get the idea for these characters?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me on your channel, Kevin. It's always a pleasure. I just wanted to say I watched your review, your analysis of Your Reality, and I really enjoyed it. Thank you for paying attention to all the details, all the red flags that I've sort of sprinkled in there. So if anyone hasn't watched the review yet, please, make sure to do it, because I think you've analyzed and you've kind of broken it apart so well. So in terms of the characters, Your Reality is a story that follows a relatively successful young woman called Alicia, who is doing rather well with her work. So she's working for, this really good marketing agency. And however, in terms of her personal relationships with men, she's kind of struggling a little bit. She's got a few insecurities. She doesn't really have, hasn't had really good relationships in the past. So when she meets this photographer, Mark, he's being super charming. He invites her on dates, and one thing leads to another, and they move in together relatively quickly. So, and during this relationship, somehow her work, everything, and just herself, I think she starts feeling quite depressed, and she's, starts drinking more and becomes more insecure, and just sort of becomes a shell of herself. And the audience sort of is left to guess, what happened to her? Why is she, is it her? Why is she being so annoying? What is going on? Like, why is she falling apart like that? And the reason behind it is that, Mark is kind of emotionally abusing her and making her feel like she is not good enough. So she's like chipping on her confidence, on her self-esteem, little by little, but to the point where she just becomes this like no one. And I don't want to reveal too much.
Yeah, you don't have to give the whole movie away. I think you've done. I think you did good. But why not share with us a little bit about where you came up with these characters? How did you nail down these people so well? Was this personal experience? Was it just I mean, you really did nail down. Look, one of the things that I've heard about this movie is that it causes people triggers. There's some parts in the movie that actually triggered me. You don't get to this depth in characters unless you either have firsthand, or you've witnessed it, or so where did this knowledge, where did this understanding come from?
Several things, really. I think all of us have experienced gaslighting in one way or another. Obviously, in this movie, I focus more on gaslighting in relationships. However, it's important to take into account that, it's happening everywhere. It's in politics and media, parents as well, at work. So I've been exposed to it in one way or another, but not to the point where it hasn't been in my relationship as much in my previous relationship. However, it happened to a really good friend of mine. And to be honest, when it happened to her, I wasn't aware what gaslighting was. So it's only later down the line that I started reading. I kind of just came across an article about gaslighting, and I started reading about it, and I was like, wow, that's crazy. And then I thought about my friend, and I was like, oh my God, this is exactly what happened to her. And I just remembered how much it affected her. So she's such a lovely, bright and always like smiley girl. And, when her ex partner started sort of like gaslighting her, it traumatized her deeply. And it took her probably like 4 to 5 years to recover from that after they broke up. And she was telling me all these experiences, and I was like, wow, this literally sounds like gaslighting. And I thought, something needs to be done about this, and we need to spread awareness. And I started just, talking to more people about it. I started reading articles. I looked at forums. I read so many books. I watched so many videos as well, just educating myself about gaslighting and how it works. And, also just narcissistic personality disorder, and how they abuse people that are close to them. And I just decided to turn it into a film. Yeah.
So you decided to put your skills to work as a filmmaker and a writer, and wow, I mean, you did a fantastic job. So again, good job on that. And I think I heard somewhere that the character Mark in the movie was actually the name of your friend's.
Yeah.
Is that true?
It's such a funny story, because I must have done it subconsciously, because the thing is that I've never met him. Because she lives in a different city. She lives in Germany, and I used to live in Germany as well, but not in Hamburg, not in the same city. And so I never met him, but obviously she told me a lot about him. And it's funny because she came to my screening. We screened the film when it got first released in like a really small cinema, independent cinema here in London. And she came, she flew in all the way from Germany, bless her. And when she watched it for the first time, she came up to me and she's like, you named him Mark? She's like, this is the name of this is my ex-boyfriend. Like, it wasn't a conscious choice. And, at that moment, I was like, oh my God, I didn't even think about it. Like the name just kind of came to me, and I literally not like in any moment during the writing process did I realize that her ex-boyfriend's name was Mark.
Wow.
So it's kind of, it must have been some kind of subconscious thing.
Well, with over 1 million views on your YouTube channel, let's hope that he's seen it. All right. And well, listen, I'd like to get into a little bit of your film, if you don't mind. I want to break down some of the scenes with you that I think are particularly useful for people, and one of them especially for me. So I want to talk about them with you. The first scene I'd like to talk about with you, if you don't mind, is in the movie right before Alicia's first date with Mark. There's a scene where she's talking with her friend, and in this scene, she's basically talking about some of her issues. And what she says is, my mom is constantly on my case about marriage and kids. She says I'm never going to get a guy because nobody likes a selfish girl. Now, Tatjana, how important was it to have this line and this scene in this movie as far as how it relates to people who are vulnerable to narcissistic abuse? Like, what's the message here? And what kind of warning are you trying to send out to people? What's in this scene?
Yes. So having read the comments, obviously, on the YouTube channel, there are a lot of people who related immediately to the film, etc. And some people were like, well, this would never happen to me. Like, I would show him the door pretty much immediately. And it's a good thing. I'm really happy if you're the kind of a person who can't relate to Alicia's character. I applaud you. But unfortunately, a lot of the times we obviously exhibit certain insecurities about ourselves. And most of the times it comes from childhood, from parents telling us that we are not good enough in one way or another, that, also potentially, social pressure of having to have family and kids as soon as possible. It's become better. But for example, me, my heritage is I'm from Eastern Europe. So even now, like my grandparents, when I Skype with them, they're like, why don't you have any kids yet? Why aren't you married yet? And, on one hand, it's sort of like the pressure that society is putting on you to like you're not complete unless you have a partner, which might push us into relationships that are potentially not good enough or not good for us. But, we feel like we need to have someone in our life, right? Otherwise, everyone will look down at us. And number two is just having some inner insecurities that make you prone to being abused by narcissists, because narcissists, as terrible as they are, and honestly, they really are some evil creatures out there, they have this amazing skill where they kind of look at you and they, when they first meet you, they really well at observing, what kind of insecurities you have. And then they kind of like store it and they learn about all your little things that you're not sure about yourself, and they use it against you. And the more sort of insecurities you have, the more arsenal you're giving to them to use against you and to kind of like lure you into this. So let's put it this way. So, for example, if I think I already talked about you before, but for example, if I know in myself that I'm not a very good chef, like I don't know how to cook, right? And then maybe I mention it at a date, and it's like a really trivial example, but the narcissist will notice it. And then every time the subject will come up, he'll keep telling me, you're a terrible chef, you don't know how to cook, this tastes terrible, etc., etc. So the reason I will accept his criticism is that somewhere inside me, there is already this seed of thoughts, that's been planted in me, that I am not good at something, or that I'm not confident enough, or that I don't deserve love, for example, right? So, and the reason that why he can keep gaslighting and chipping away at my confidence is because somewhere in me, I believe that he's right. You know what I mean? So I think it's really important to understand that we can prevent or protect ourselves from narcissists if we don't allow them to, we need to understand how they work, I think, to if you show them your insecurities, etc., and they start kind of attacking them, that's a really big red flag.
Right. Yeah. So that scene where she's talking with her friend, she's acknowledging some issues and some vulnerabilities of her life, but she doesn't quite know that they're vulnerable. When you don't know what a narcissist is, you don't know how they can play on your vulnerabilities. So it sounds like it's very important for you to get across this message, even though a lot of people may look at this as victim shaming, but it's not. But it's a call out for people to know their vulnerabilities in life prior to getting in relationships, so that they know if they're being used, if they're being lied to, if they're being manipulated, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like you said, ultimately we carry the burden in this life of breaking cycles if we're being used. We can't sit there and let people play on our vulnerabilities, but again, it's a very difficult thing to understand, and I'm glad that you put that in the movie. That was something that I was very, like when I saw it, I realized, wow, Tatjana is not just making a horror flick about an evil narcissistic person, because that would be an easy movie to make, just a really bad guy that everybody can go, oh, look at that evil horror guy. what you did is you captured the dynamic. You put some issues out there. You made Alicia vulnerable to it to send a very powerful message of watch out because there's bad people out there. And so you better have your mind together about relationships, right? So thank you.
Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I would even would like to add something to this, that I actually, when I was writing it, as you were saying, like it would be so easy to just make Mark the bad guy from the outset. But I actually wanted the audience to be like, he's actually not that bad, like he's just a normal guy. Like I wanted for the audience to see Mark from Alicia's perspective, where she doesn't see the situation clearly, right? Because in a relationship, you don't see everything objectively. You just see the reality that they feed you.
What you want to see. You see what you want to see. Yeah.
Especially when you're in love, right?
Right.
It's a very good expression, sort of like you see everything through like, pink glasses, like life is rosy.
The rosy goggles. Yeah.
Rosy goggles. That's the one. So I think it's so interesting because some people, I also read comments on YouTube, that they're like, well, he doesn't seem that bad. It's just like, it seems like a normal relationship until you get to the final scene, which I'm not going to reveal what it is.
Yeah, no, you did a great job. Absolutely. I like that about the movie too, that in the beginning, we kind of like Mark. I mean, when I met Mark, I think I made a pun in the review, this not so good looking dude. No, but the fact of the matter is your casting was excellent. Mark was, great looking guy. Alicia, obviously by you, very good looking girl. So great casting, had the look, had the feel. Mark came across as a very likable guy, and it wasn't until you start to see the effects on Alicia that you start to question, well, what's going on? And I wanted to, continue on because there's more scenes I want to break down. I hope you don't mind here. So the story in your movie, it cuts actually right after Alicia has her first date with Mark. And I think in the review of the movie, I pointed out when Alicia's heart just explodes and she's just all falling in love over this guy. And it cuts from that to Alicia actually moving in with Mark. It just goes black, and then the next scene is her moving in. Now, I know this is open to interpretation, but I want to know from your perspective, and I deal with people who struggle from narcissistic abuse. I take one-on-one appointments all the time, and I have heard all kinds of crazy stories. I have heard of people moving in a week, like 3 weeks later, a month later. I have heard of when it comes to becoming too intimate and maybe becoming sexual, I have heard stories of people getting involved that same day that they met the person. I mean, this stuff really happens out there. And so I just wanted to hear from your perspective, because you just cut from their first date to moving in. If you could fill in the gap as to what that time length looked like, what would it be? How long would you say it took Alicia to move in?
So I think when I was writing it, I was thinking about like 3 to 4 months. I decided not to put any sometimes you can include like a title, like 3 months later or whatever. I decided to leave it up to interpretation because I think it is quite personal and subjective, like when it really happens. Of course, with me as well, writing this as a short film, I only had 20 minutes to play with. So I didn't really have enough time to expand on, him kind of like love bombing her more. I really wanted to do that. And that's something for the feature film that we're working on. So, but I do agree with you that I think with narcissists, right, they can only keep their mask on for that long, right? That like they are pretending in the beginning, they're really putting a lot of effort into impressing you. They love everything you love. They, have the same interests. They have the same hobbies. They are like this perfect soulmate, which is all an act, right? They're like, I think narcissists probably are some of the best actors they are in real life, because they fool you into believing that they are just the perfect person for you. And they would usually be pushing for or insisting for you to move in with them very, very quickly, because once they have you, they can kind of like, once you're a bit more dependent on them, they can start revealing their true self.
It's a good thing. It's interesting you brought that up. I applaud you, because you're absolutely right. They move real fast. They want that award. They want that trophy as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So it's like a mouse trying to get the cheese, right? So I think it's important for all of us to be on guard against that, right? Is the faster people move in our lives when they meet us and they want something, maybe we should stand back and go, whoa, this is all so fast. It's not necessarily a good thing, right? So thank you for including that in the movie. That's great. Just a couple of more here. Rather than, and this goes back to something we talked about a little bit earlier, but rather than see Mark as a bully in the movie, because we don't, the character's not written out to be a bully from the get-go, as you talked about previously. Instead, the movie focuses on Alicia, and it focuses on how her life is being affected by this toxic relationship. And so this is interesting, and I want to talk with you about this, because, and this gets into a deeper topic here, but this could go one of two ways. Either the relationship that she's in could be negatively affecting her work life, or she could just be struggling in her work life, which causes her to latch on even harder to a toxic relationship as in a way of looking for help. How would you, so there's two different ways. A lot of times when I'm working with one-on-one with individuals, I oftentimes ask them, when they're dealing with narcissistic abuse, one of the questions I ask them individually is, what else is going on in your life? What else is falling apart in your life? Because oftentimes when you experience narcissistic abuse, it's a result of all kinds of other things just falling apart, going to shit. And you're grabbing onto this relationship in hopes to help you. So, but I wanted to hear from your perspective, what is going on with the character Alicia? What does this represent? Is it, how would you, in your creative mind, where was she at? Okay. What does her suffering in her life represent?
So it's interesting because you pointed out two scenarios, so two possible scenarios. There's actually a third one, which was the one that I originally sort of intended to kind of making more, pointing it out more. And then I decided to kind of like leave it a bit more open. So my initial intention was actually that Mark was sabotaging Alicia's work behind the scenes. Like even, the scene where she's looking for her phone, I was like, he hid her phone. He like changed, even like I had the scene, but I cut it out in the end, that he sort of like sabotaged one of her presentations. So he was sort of like even trying to sabotage her work to make sure that he is the savior, kind of a thing. So he is the one to pick her up, or to to make her dependent on him. I decided to leave it out in the end just because I thought it was just too much and it's not as important. In a way, like, so the second one was idea was that, yes, her, I think it could go both ways. So my thinking was that, her losing or her not doing really well at work was just a direct consequence of Mark constantly doubting her and constantly sort of like saying that she was not good enough, and basically because she works in like a marketing agency where she constantly has to pitch to clients, her confidence is really the most important thing. And once that's gone, she starts losing clients. So that was sort of like one other thing. But I can totally also imagine the situation where, just coincidentally something goes wrong at work and you become more dependent on the narcissist sort of to balance out, I suppose, your private and work life. So you look to them for moral support, which they maybe give you a little bit, but nearly not enough.
Yeah, oftentimes people start leaning into these abusive people, which in a way to an abusive personality kind of makes them look more pathetic, and they don't deal well with that. It seems like narcissistic people, they idealize the partner as well. They look at the partner as being somebody that is going to save them from their pain and suffering. And when that person starts experiencing problems at work or whatever, they look at that person like, how dare you suffer? You're not supposed to suffer. You're supposed to just serve me, type of a thing. So, but I like the third idea, the one that you put out there, which is also very true, that narcissistic people can actually sabotage behind your back. I have heard stories of narcissistic exes and spouses who have contacted people's works and jobs and stirred up all kinds of weird things. And that actually goes into the next scene that I want to break down with you, because it actually, we see this in the film. But it's the scene in which Alicia and Mark just had a fight, and Alicia reached out to her best friend for some emotional support. And in that phone call, she finds out that Mark had already called her best friend for the purpose of talking about Alicia behind her back. And I believe the comment was that Mark made the statement that Alicia was acting very strange. And the look on Alicia's face in that scene was priceless. I'm going to show a little clip of that right here, but I wanted to hear in your words what was going on in Alicia's mind at the moment when she found out that Mark had contacted her best friend.
I think the biggest thought would be kind of betrayal both from Mark and the friend, who is now siding with Mark and not Alicia, and just probably helplessness. She doesn't know who to turn to, because she's not feeling well, and she's wondering whether it's her or it's Mark, or things just don't work out. And I think by him turning her best friend into his ally, she is left completely alone, completely, defenseless. And I think it also just reinforces her doubts about herself, because obviously she's already thinking, he keeps telling her something's wrong with you, and you're acting strange, and you're all, depressed, and which was caused by him in the first place. But she's thinking she's the problem in the relationship, right? And her friend siding with Mark just reinforces that idea, and that just makes her completely defenseless and alone, and it's a terrible feeling, I can imagine, where all your support network is just completely taken away from you.
People oftentimes ask me, Kevin, when will I be myself again? And as if that is the goal of healing. And my response is usually, you're not going to be the person you used to be. So if you're looking at that as being the place of healing, then you've got the wrong idea. Rather, if you can find yourself in a place where you don't experience narcissistic abuse anymore, where, even if it means you're different, even if it means you're slightly more closed off, then to me, that's healed.
Yeah.
Because you're not suffering at the hands of abusive people anymore. I thank you so much, Tatjana. Your movie is absolutely brilliant. I'm excited to see what else you're going to do, especially if you continue on with topics like these. I know you are busy and working on all kinds of films and movies right now, and I thank you for taking some time with me.
Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can do more of these.